Hey folks, I'm Chris and I am your Commander Mechanic, and welcome to the first ever live Let's Do a Brew here on Twitch. If you're watching the VOD of this, make sure to join me as I'm going to be doing more of these at twitch.tv/Commander Mechanic. I did want to thank all of my beautiful sponsors that you can see down here for making this possible. They're as lovely as all of you watching right now. And as a very, very special first tune-up of 2022, as well as the first live tune-up, I wanted to take a look at a very special deck. And I'm going to be looking at the Secret Lair Commander Deck. That's right, Wizards is doing a direct-to-market Commander Deck that you can buy through Secret Lair. It's got alt art, it's got special foil cards in it, a few really good reprints in there too. Honestly, it's a really good deck. It's Gavin Verhey, who is Magic's senior designer, doing his own Commander deck. This is his personal deck. So, I mean, if I can find some spots to tune it up, some changes to make, we'll see what we can do to maybe put our own spin on Gavin's deck. All right. So first, our commanders. Okay, this is Okaun and Zndrsplt as our commanders, and these are the Battle Bond partner with commanders out of the Izzet color pairing, red and blue. Let's take a look at what our commanders do. First is Okaun, Eye of Chaos, 5 mana 3/3, partners with Zndrsplt, unsurprisingly. At the beginning of combat on your turn, flip a coin until you lose a flip. So right there, that's the whole crux of our deck. But every time a player wins a flip, you double Okaun's power and toughness until end of turn. And that's whenever a player wins a flip, not just you. So while the deck is going to encourage you to be flipping a lot of coins, it's going to be encouraging everybody to flip coins because you're going to get benefit from that, largely in making Okaun very, very large. All right. Next up is our partner here, Zndrsplt, Eye of Wisdom. Another 5 mana commander. This one's a 1/4 homunculus, a creature type that I'm personally a big fan of. I don't know if there are any homunculus fans out in chat right now, but I feel like between Zndrsplt and Fibblethip, I love the consonant-less names on homunculi. But Zndrsplt here is our draw engine in the deck. He's also got, at the beginning of combat on your turn, flip a coin until you lose a flip. And then whenever a player wins a coin flip, draw a card. And that's a big one. That's one of the primary reasons why we're going to want to make everybody flip coins and as many coins as possible. Because this is going to be a big, big one. All right? We'll take a look at that. Thanks, chat. So these two together make a really interesting pair. We get to see two really interesting commanders that are making us flip a lot of coins. Okaun wants us to go hard in the red zone, turn sideways, and do some real battling here. And then Zndrsplt wants us to flip as many coins as possible for that sweet, sweet card advantage. All right? And those together are basically what we want to do out of the deck. I personally love this deck straight out of the box because it's very much leaning into one thing and one thing in particular, and that's coin flipping. If we can flip as many coins as possible in this deck, then we're going to do everything that we want to do. So let's take a look at some of the individual cards, see if there's anything that we can swap up, any weak spots or any really good spots in the deck. All right. The first thing that I really want to point out is that we've got kind of a hidden commander in the deck too. I really like this. Anybody who's a fan of the channel and a fan of my brewing style knows that I love having like a really, really important card hidden in the 99. And in this case, it's the bad boy itself, Krark's Thumb, hidden in the 99 of the deck. This is very much a card that you want to get out as soon as possible in this deck. Its inclusion in this deck is incredibly important. The more flips that we can be doing and the more flips that we can be winning, the better. And if we flip 2 coins and we win both of them, then we can draw that many cards and we can double Okaun's power that many times. As such, Gavin, when he designed this deck, included several ways to go get Krark's Thumb. Between Fabricate, Whir of Invention, Tribute Mage, and a few other things, we've got some tutors in here to go grab Krark's Thumb as soon as possible. Ideally, if we have Krark's Thumb out, by the time we get our commanders in play, we've gone off. At that point, we've got the capability to make our commanders massive, draw a boatload of cards, and break some of the synergy of some of the other cards in the deck that we'll take a look at too. The other thing that I really like about this deck is that there are some pivots to it. I really like having the capability of changing up who's leading your deck to see how it's changing your playstyle, or what the cards in the 99 do with a different commander. In this case, we've got one very important pivot here in Yusri, Fortune's Flame. This is the Ifrit that allows us to flip coins and either draws us cards or deals damage to us out of Modern Horizons 2, so a relatively new card. But it's another card draw engine that comes down a lot sooner than Zndrsplt does. And if we can go Krark's Thumb into Yusri and start drawing a lot of cards right away, we're going to just drown our opponents out in value. And that is how you win a game. It said the person who draws the most cards wins the game, or the person who spends the most mana wins the game. And if we're able to both spend the most mana and draw the most cards, then we can run away with a game with this deck. There's about a half other pivot in the deck too in Krark the Thumbless. This is, of course, Krarky Boy himself, of whose thumb we've just been talking about. But he allows us to flip when we cast spells, to either double that spell or return it to our hand. More chances to double that spell if we're using Krark's Thumb at the same time. If we're able to do that, then we're able to get twice as much value out of this. And in some instances, in some ways, we may be able to do something like take infinite turns with this, which I'll talk about in a second. All right. The reason why I call this a half of a pivot is because Krark is a partner, but there are no other partners in the deck. That is where I would include one of my favorite cards and a great partner for Krark, Sakashima of 1,000 Faces. Sakashima of 1,000 Faces and Krark the Thumbless makes for a really, really strong deck. There are a few people that have brewed up Krark and Sakashima for CEDH. That's how powerful it gets. It can get on the very high end of the power scale. So that means that one of the first things that I would do to change this deck is to find room for Sakashima of 1,000 Faces. Gavin, when he designed the deck, already put in Spark Double so that you can make doubles of Okaun, Zndrsplt, Yusri, or Krark, and Sakashima the Imposter so that you can do the same thing. And when we start getting multiple copies of these legendary creatures, we really go off the rails. Thanks to all of the new followers coming out today. I really do appreciate you coming out for the first ever stream of mine. Thanks, everybody. So as we get into this, again, the first change that I would do is make room for Sakashima of 1,000 Faces. Sakashima makes for a great pivot commander with Krark, but also being able to make 2 of any of the other legends in the deck is ideal. Imagine flipping 10 coins a turn with 2 copies of Yusri, right? With Krark's Thumb out, we can be drawing 10 cards. That's kind of bonkers, right? We can be making 2 Zndrsplts I mean, with Sakashima the Imposter, Spark Double, and Sakashima of 1,000 Faces, we can be making 4 Zndrsplts, and you know how my mouth starts watering when you can make multiple copies of a creature. It's one of my favorite things to do in Magic, so naturally, I love this already. All right. Our commanders are coin flip commanders here, chat, in case you're joining in late. So we want to flip as many coins as possible. We want to make them as big as possible, draw as many cards as possible. But on the pivot, again, we've got Krark and Sakashima of 1,000 Faces as a potential pivot here, and we've got Yusri Fortune's Flame as a potential pivot here. All 3 of these sets of commanders work really well at the lead of this deck. So getting this Secret Lair essentially gives you access to whichever flavor of coin flip you want. And I love that. Personally, that's my brewing style as well. Okay, so if we can get Krark's Thumb out, and we can get any of these legends out, we're hitting the ground running already. Now, based on some of the other cards that are in the 99 here, I want to do a quick rundown where I do some cuts, what I'm happy with and what I'm not happy with. Taking a look at the deck list, let me know in chat what jumps out to you right away as must-haves or must-cuts here. All right, interested in your opinion. Okay, first up are our 2 Planeswalkers. We've got Duretti Scrap Savant as our first Planeswalker. Duretti is not only a card quality engine, but is one of the best ways to go get Krark's Thumb back. Okay, so Duretti is really important because Duretti lets us rebuy artifacts. I mentioned that Krark's Thumb is like a hidden commander in this deck. Duretti is a crucial way to make sure if Krark's Thumb gets removed or milled or discarded, that you're able to get it back. I love the inclusion here because we can also use it to filter lands out of our hand if we draw too many of those. And as we draw more and more cards, we're going to be left with more lands that we can play and more lands than we can play. So using Duretti's +2 to discard cards and draw cards, really good. Ral Zarek is, yes, chat knew it, the coin flipping planeswalker, rather. The ultimate on Ral flips us 5 coins. And that's great, but it is on his ultimate. Keep in mind that you need to get 7 loyalty on Ral using only +1s in order to get him to this ultimate. So that's 4 turns of +1ing and protecting Ral here, right? Starts with 4 loyalty, 3 +1s, and then using that -7. So while Ral fits the flavor of the deck, personally, this would be the first on the chopping block of our cuts, in my opinion. All right, so I'm going to remove it right there. Now, getting into our creatures. We've got some really cool creatures in here that we're going to take a look at, and I'll make some recommendations for additions. Right? It's a good thing you're asking, chat. How many coin flipping cards are there in Magic? We'll take a look as we're adding new cards to the deck. All right. So first up on our creatures, we've got Bloodsworn Steward. Bloodsworn Steward is what I would call a high value floor or a mid value floor card. It's not synergistic, meaning it's not having to deal with coin flips. It doesn't get our commanders out faster. It doesn't go get Krark's Thumb. But what it does is it makes our commanders larger, helps protect them, and in, I think, the most important case, gives them haste. So that's the important one, because with Okaun, what we want to do is we want to attack with him right away. He's going to come down, and if we don't attack with him right away, he's going to get removed. Because Okaun can become 99.99, ridiculously large, very, very quickly. So Bloodsworn Steward is in here to enable the attacking game plan, not the coin flipping game plan here. All right, so really interesting inclusion. I like it. Not terrible, pretty decent, but it's in the maybe pile for me in terms of cuts, just because it doesn't get us any deeper into our strategy. Okay. Next up is Frenetic Sliver. So this is a really interesting sliver that lets us flip a coin. And if we win the flip, we can essentially blink the sliver. Okay. If we lose the flip, we sacrifice it. So this one is great for enabling at least one coin flip. But if we've got a Krark's Thumb out, we're that much more likely to be able to win this flip. Okay? Now, Frenetic Sliver is a decent include, and there's a decent alternative to this that I would really like to see. And we'll talk about that when we get to our additions to the deck. So Frenetic Sliver is okay. There aren't any other slivers in the deck, you might be asking right now. Frenetic Sliver gives all slivers the capability to flip a coin, but this is the only one. All right. Hey, Chris, thanks. So moving on through our creatures, we've got Goblin Archaeologist. Okay, Goblin Archaeologist, 2 mana, 1/2, lets us pay red and flip a coin. If you win the flip, you destroy an artifact and essentially get to storm with the Archaeologist, get to do it again. If you lose the flip, you sacrifice the Archaeologist. So right there, we've got 2 creatures right away that if we lose a flip, we sacrifice them. That means that if we lose the first flip on Archaeologist, we've paid 3 mana to sacrifice a creature. Does that sound great to you, chat? Does that sound particularly exciting? Are you whelmed by that or not? Because I'm not. I don't think it's fantastic, right? So I would say both the Sliver and the Archaeologist, they're on the chopping block here. They're great on the lower end of the curve, but honestly, until you've got Krark's Thumb out, until you've got a way to ensure you're winning a coin flip, or at least increasing your odds of winning a coin flip, it's not fantastic. They aren't great. The next creature we have is Goblin Engineer. Goblin Engineer, on the other hand, this is another way to get Krark's Thumb back. This is not only a way to get Krark's Thumb back, but a tutor for Krark's Thumb. So when Goblin Engineer enters the battlefield, we get to go search our library for an artifact and put it into the bin. And hey, in the bin, at least we know where it is. But then we can pay red, tap, and sacrifice another artifact to return an artifact with mana value 3 or less from our graveyard to the battlefield. So it's a way to rebuy an artifact. And in this case, we want to keep rebuying Krark's Thumb in case we lose it. Because it is key to our strategy, right? Yeah, exactly, Chad. There are ways to make everything slivers, but considering it's not a core synergy within the deck, it's not worth putting in an arcane adaptation into the deck in order to do that, right? So next up in our creature list is Goblin Kaboomist. Goblin Kaboomist gets us to put a landmine counter on the battlefield that essentially shocks things, but flips us a coin every time we do that. If we lose the flip, then Kaboomist blows itself up. This is another creature that A, flips us a coin, but B, kills itself if we lose the flip. And that is not what we want to be doing in this deck. This is more ways for us to be flipping coins, but at the cost of potentially our stuff. I don't like that high risk, high reward. And it's not even a high reward in these instances. It's just high risk. I'm more in favor of us doing sure things in this deck and removing a few of these small ways that flip us coins and cost us permanence to do it. I'm not a fan of, right? So a couple of these creatures are on the chopping block right away. Okay. Then we've got a really good one here. Carplusian Minotaur. If you've never heard of this creature, I don't blame you, but this is a good one in this deck. So Carplusion Minotaur is a 4-mana 3/3 with cumulative upkeep, flip a coin. For anybody who's been playing Magic before cumulative upkeep, this means that every turn you put an age counter on the creature or the permanent, and then do what it says for the cumulative upkeep. That might be pay a mana, that might be pay a life, and in this instance, it's flip a coin. So if we've got Carplusion Minotaur out for 4 turns, we're flipping 4 coins here, or 3 coins, rather. And if we're doing that, then with all of our great synergies here, then we are really, really benefiting from it. Hey, chat. All right. And if we're able to do that, then we're able to draw a bunch of cards on our upkeep, make Okaun really big before we ever go to combat, and do some really, really cool things. And in this instance, when we win a coin flip, we get to ping stuff, creatures or players. We get to go right to the dome. We get to pop off on a creature, whatever it might be. And whenever we lose a coin flip, Carplusion Minotaur deals 1 damage to a creature or player of an opponent's choice. Really interesting wording on that one, because it's not damage to Carplusion Minotaur, and it's not damage to specifically you or your creatures, it's an opponent's choice. So Carplusion Minotaur makes for a really political inclusion in this deck, because you can convince somebody on every coin flip to ping off something of another opponent. Say an opponent has a Soul's Attendant, gaining them a bunch of life. If you lose that flip, you can ping that creature. And note that it's not just whenever you win a coin flip from Carplusion Minotaur. It's whenever you win a coin flip at all, you get to ping something. Whenever you lose a coin flip at all, an opponent gets to ping something. In this, that's a lot of damage to be thrown around, and you can really convince opponents that there are other more important threats at the table to machine gun down. So Carplusion Minotaur is, in my opinion, one of the best creatures in this deck for our core synergy. We talked about Kirk a little bit, a great pivot here, but a great way to get a little bit more out of our instants and sorceries. About 20% of our deck is instants and sorceries, so Kirk leans into that. If we were to pivot and use Kirk as our commander here alongside Sakashima of 1,000 Faces, we'd really want to ratchet up those spells. But for now, I think Kirk's, again, one of the heavy hitters in the deck. And what we want out of somebody who's flipping us coins. He doesn't sacrifice anything. He might return the spell to our hand, but I'd rather pay 1 mana and return a gamble to my hand than pay 3 mana and immediately sacrifice my Frenetic Sliver. Right? Okay. Next up is Mogg Assassin. So Mogg Assassin is a 3-mana 2/1 that has his tap and flip a coin. If you win the flip, you destroy a creature an opponent controls. Otherwise, they destroy a creature of that opponent's choice. Again, much like Carplusion Minotaur, not necessarily your creature. Another political tool here, but it is a kind of double-sided sword here, double-edged sword. If you try and blow up an opponent's creature and fail, do you think you're going to be able to convince them to blow up a different creature, or are they going to come immediately for your stuff? The last thing that we want to do is lose one of our 5-mana commanders to a Mogg Assassin, our own Mogg Assassin. So while it's interesting, I think that it's more of the clutch inclusion. And while I like it in the deck, it's not something that necessarily bites us. It does what we want, and can be a really useful tool to kill a creature that might be preventing us from actually attacking. All right. Hey, fam. All right. Next up is Niv Mizzet Parun. So Niv Mizzet Parun is an odd inclusion in the deck. Much like with Bloodsworn Steward, this creature doesn't lean into our primary synergy. And is a really, really odd choice, I'd say, because of that heavy, hefty mana investment for that mana cost. 3 blue and 3 red is incredibly hard to hit in this deck. You might see over on the right-hand side here, but the lands included in this deck, there are a ton of non-basics in here that don't produce colored mana. That's rough. That's tough. Being able to cast Niv Mizzet on curve in this deck is not going to be easy. I personally am not a huge fan of including Niv Mizzet in this deck. Again, we only have 21 instants and sorceries in the deck. Sure, it triggers off of other players casting spells, but the chances are this 6 mana dragon isn't coming down until turn 8 because we aren't able to meet that color requirement. We can adjust the mana base to cast Niv Mizzet, or we can cut Niv Mizzet. What do you think, chat? What do you think we should do? Should we cut Niv Mizzet, or should we adjust the mana base? We'll take a look at that in a second, but make sure to let me know what you think. We've talked about our Sakashimas and Spark Double. Making extra copies of our commanders and our legendary creatures, whoo, baby, is it ever good. Once we start flipping more coins each turn, and getting that benefit, even 2 Zndrsplts goes buck wild. 2 Okauns are these massive attackers. Winning 1 coin flip turns each Okaun into a 12-12. Or sorry, each one into a 6-6, rather. Winning 2 turns each one into a 12-12. You get bigger and bigger, and you get more and more of them. I think that these are some of the best cards in the deck, but y'all know my penchant for making copies of creatures. So we'll take a look at that, but I'm definitely keeping that one in. So next on the list is Tavern Scoundrel. Tavern Scoundrel is a house in this deck. An absolute house. Tavern Scoundrel reads, whenever you win a coin flip, create 2 treasure tokens. Woo! Making 2 mana whenever you flip a coin, whenever you win a flip, rather, is an incredible benefit here. Absolutely incredible benefit. There are some ways to use Tavern Scoundrel, multiple copies of Krark the Thumbless, and some of our spells to just go infinite. Cast as many spells as we want. Okay? And how that works for everybody is if you've got 2 Krark the Thumbless, you get 2 triggers on a spell cast. Okay? You get to flip 2 coins for each spell that you cast. A heads copies that spell, or a win copies that spell, and it goes to the bin. A tails returns that spell to your hand. If you're able to both win a flip on one copy and lose a flip on another copy, you get a copy of that spell, and then the original returns to your hand. So you've won a flip, Tavern Scoundrel makes you 2 mana, and you return that spell back to your hand, and you've got it again. So if you've got 2 copies of Krark, Krark's Thumb, a Tavern Scoundrel, and a spell that costs 2 or less mana, you're basically guaranteed to go infinite on spellcasts. Okay? Sure, that's a lot of hoops to jump through. That's like a 4-card combo, 5 if you include the spell that you're casting. But if you do it with a Slip Through Space, which is a cantrip, you've generated infinite mana, and you've drawn your entire deck. And not infinite mana, but you've generated an arbitrary amount of mana. You can do it with a few other spells in the deck. Any of these cantrips here draw you more and more cards, so you can draw you through the entire deck. It's pretty rad. All right. So Tavern Scoundrel is absolutely a keep in this deck because it's going to be able to make you tons of mana. And I left off its activated ability. You can pay 1 tap and sacrifice any other permanent you control to flip a coin. Just for no reason to flip a coin. If you win that flip, you create 2 treasures and whatever else. And it's a great way to enable at least 1 coin flip a turn. And you can be sacrificing garbage permanents. You can be sacrificing lands, if you've got too many of them, you can be sacrificing maybe some of these less than ideal creatures. If you want, you can be sacrificing some of the old treasures that you've made with Tavern Scoundrel. You could be sacrificing things that opponents have given you in order to kind of set their plan back if they've gifted you something with a Blim, Comedic Genius, or a Zedru, for instance. You can sacrifice those permanents that they've traded you. All right. Then we've got the Locust God. So the Locust God is an interesting include in here. I would say Locust God is a great ideal of what a backup plan is in this deck. You really want to be leaning into your coin flipping synergies here, but if your commanders and even your inside the deck legends get too prohibitive to cast, the Locust God is a great backup plan for this. This is a deck that's going to be drawing a bunch of cards. It's going to be making a bunch of insects with the Locust God out, and it's really hard to get rid of the Locust God because of that tuck ability to it. Again, it doesn't lean into our primary synergies. It doesn't advance our coin flipping game, but it's a solid card. Again, a high value floor card. One that I would keep in the deck just as this card is good whenever you draw it. All right. Then we've got Tribute Mage. I spoke about this at the top, but this is a tutor for Crux Thumb. Okay. Without a doubt, you go get a 2 mana value artifact, reveal it, put it in your hand. If you don't already have a Crux Thumb, then it goes gets a Crux Thumb. If you've already got a Crux Thumb, then it goes gets you one of a dozen mana rocks that the deck has in here. So Tribute Mage, super good. And we've talked about Usury as well. So overall, our creatures are all right. There's some room for improvement. In particular, Kaboomist, Archaeologist, and Frenetic Sliver are ones that are on the chopping block, in my opinion. They flip coins, but they're very, very risky flips. I wouldn't gamble too much on that kind of thing. Okay, any creatures pop out in your mind, chat? No. All right, let me know. On to our spells. We've got some classics in here. Blasphemous Act, staple in red, without a doubt. Chandra's Ignition. This is a win con in this deck. I want everybody to be aware that if you've ever played against an Okaun and Zndrsplt deck, Okaun gets ridiculously large. Absolutely bonkers big. And being able to Chandra's Ignition, a massive Okaun, lets you take out the entire table with one spell. Otherwise, you're attacking one player at a time with your big Okaun. That's not a euphemism. But a Chandra's Ignition allows you to take out the entire board, the entire table. It's really, really good. All right. Fabricate goes and gets a Crux Thumb. Fiery Gambit. So Fiery Gambit is a card that I like in some decks and not others. I might be a little bit hesitant to include it in this one, even though it is a coin flip card and a coin flip deck. Fiery Gambit is a confusing one. I would put this one up there with Wheel of Misfortune as to how confusing Fiery Gambit is. So Fiery Gambit reads, look at that text box, flip a coin until you lose a flip or choose to stop flipping. If you lose a flip, Fiery Gambit does nothing. Nothing. Woo, nothing. If you win one or more flips, Fiery Gambit lightning bolts a target creature. Okay? If you win 2 or more flips, Fiery Gambit deals 6 damage to each opponent. It's not bad. If you win 3 or more flips, draw 9 cards and untap all lands you control. So it becomes a super wheel. It doesn't make you discard your hand, untaps all lands you control, but if you lose a flip in there, you've paid 3 mana and done nothing. So that's really, really risky. The interesting thing to note here is that Fiery Gambit requires a target creature in play. Okay, so if you're looking to cast this, you need to choose which target you're lightning bolting first. If there's nothing else in play, you have to choose one of your creatures in order to cast this spell. The only way that this card is good is with Krark's Thumb out. The only way that this card is good is with Krark's Thumb out. Or if you're getting multiple copies of it. Okay? I play this one in Zada Hedron Grinder. This one's really good in Zada Hedron Grinder because if you get a Fiery Gambit for each creature you control, you just stop flipping whenever you win 2 flips. Right? So if I've got 6 creatures in play, and I've got 6 copies of Fiery Gambit because of those creatures, because you need to target a creature, so you target your... Zada or one of your other creatures and it copies it for all of the rest of them, every time you hit 2 coins, you stop. And then you deal 6 damage to each opponent for every time you've won 2 coin flips. That gets to be a lot of damage really quickly. In this instance, you need to win 3 coin flips for this to be of any benefit. It's cute. It flips coins. I would be hesitant to include it. It's on the chopping block in terms of spells for me. What do you think about it, chat? Are you still confused about what it does? I wouldn't blame you. All right. Then we've got Gamble. So Gamble, classic, another staple in red. This can go and get us our Krark's Thumb or any of our combo pieces or any of our game winners here. Again, it's risky. High risk, high reward is kind of the name of the deck here, but I'm looking to bring that risk down with my tune-up. Okay? That might be blasphemy. That might be a blasphemous act in Gavin's eyes when he designed this deck, but I really want to make it more consistent. Right? We've got our classic 1-mana cantrips here. We've got Ponder, we've got Preordain, we've got Serum Visions. Interestingly, no Brainstorm in the deck. That's one that I wouldn't mind including here if I were to add another card in. All right. We've got Reshape, which is another tutor for Krark's Thumb, unsurprisingly. We need to be going to get that Krark's Thumb. Seize the Day, which is an extra combat spell that, because of Flashback, we can cast twice in a turn. Untap target creature, so you only get to attack with 1 creature an additional time. But with Okaun and Zndrsplt, we get an additional combat phase. And if you'll recall, both of them say at the beginning of combat, flip a coin until you lose a flip. So Seize the Day is the cheapest way for us to go back and get these triggers from our commanders over and over and over again. Okay, so keep that in mind. And with Okaun retaining his power boost throughout multiple combats, if you can swing multiple times with Okaun, you are going to crush someone. You are absolutely going to destroy someone. And Okaun only needs to get up to 21 damage getting through in order to kill somebody, to take them out with commander damage. So we'll take a look at some of the other ways in the deck here that's one of our primary win cons here. Big Okaun, big smash. Okay? So Seize the Day is one of the ways that we can essentially attack 3 opponents in 1 turn. Your natural attack, your Seize the Day attack, and then your flashback attack. All right? We talked about Serum Visions. Slip Through Space. Slip Through Space is a very, very underrated cantrip. I mentioned that it was a cantrip earlier, but this is a 1-mana target creature is unblockable this turn. If we make Okaun unblockable, we've killed somebody. We are taking somebody out of the game. If they can't block our Okaun after we won a few coin flips, they're going to take lethal commander damage. Easy as that. If we can combine Slip Through Space and Seize the Day with Okaun, then Slip Through Spacing, one of those, on Okaun, making him unblockable, and then getting to attack 3 times with him, woo! That is a fantastic way to ensure that you're getting big punchies in there. You're going to be able to do that commander damage, and you're going to be able to get those extra combats to make him even bigger and even bigger. I know Gavin's got some stories where Okaun's reached up into the thousands of power here, so it's really cool to see. All right. Next up in our sorceries is Squeeze Revenge. Choose a number, flip a coin that many times, or until you lose a flip. So if you choose 99 flips, you can flip one coin, lose it, and then this does nothing. If you win all the flips, draw 2 cards for each flip. So this is another card that sure gets us to flip some coins, high risk, high reward, but can make us pay 3 mana and do literally nothing. Unless we've got a Krark's Thumb in play or a Krark the Thumbless in play, this is a spell that is, again, a little too high risk for my blood. I'd like to see some kind of consistency out of it. I'd like to see it draw a card at least on its own. We'll see if we can swap this out for something else. But hey, if you can choose 2 and win 2 coin flips with Squeeze Revenge, 3 mana to draw 4 cards, it's not bad. That's a good return. Okay. Next up is a really interesting one. And this one plays into that combo that I mentioned earlier. Stitch in Time. Stitch in Time is 3 mana, flip a coin. If you win the flip, take an extra turn after this one. So it's a 3 mana extra turn spell with a coin flip. Basically everything that we want in this deck. The extra turn gets us extra combats, which get us to flip more coins, making our commanders do more, yada, yada, yada. All right. One of the interesting things with this, I mentioned with the Sakashima of 1,000 Faces and Krark the Thumbless combo here. So if we can make 2 copies of Krark the Thumbless, okay, with Krark's Thumb out to increase consistency, and we Stitch in Time, if we win one of our flips with Krark, and then lose one of our flips with Krark, and don't think the irony of me putting my thumbs up talking about Krark is lost here. But if we win one of the flips, we get an extra copy of Stitch in Time, and then lose the flip and return Stitch in Time to our hand. We can take infinite turns. Yes, we can take infinite turns. So we get the extra turn off of the copy of Stitch in Time, and then we return the original to our hand. In our next turn, we do the same thing. Take an extra turn, cast Stitch in Time, win a flip with one of our Krarks, lose a flip with one of our Krarks, return it to our hand. Easy as that. So we can go infinite. We can take infinite turns, but we need to ensure that we're winning that flip. We're winning that flip to take an extra turn. We're winning that flip to return that spell to our hands. It's real good. It's real good. Then we've got Vandal Blast. Vandal Blast, a premium removal spell. Single target, 1 mana, destroy an artifact. This is great if something is keeping Okaun back, like a Norn's Annex, or an Ensnaring Bridge, or a Meek Stone, something that's preventing Okaun from attacking. Vandal Blast is a great way to just pew pew, get it out of there. But then you can overload it and you can take out everything. All right. Again, decent include. Over to our instants in this instant. Thanks, chat, for hanging out. We've got some more removal in Chaos Warp and Counterspell. Very much staples of these colors. We've got Long-Term Plans, which is another tutor here. I think a bit of an underrated tutor in a lot of decks. It does make you put it third from the top of your library when you cast it. And at $4.50, not the cheapest card to include in a deck like this. I think that there might be some better ones, but it's still decent and still a decent include. It's the first ever reprint we're getting of this card, and it's really welcome to see, even if it is in a deck like this. We've got Muddle the Mixture. Muddle the Mixture is really important because on the surface it looks like a counterspell. But it's actually a 3 mana tutor for Krark's Thumb. You can transmute it by paying 3 mana at sorcery speed to go get a spell with mana value of 2 and put it into your hand. And in this case, the most important 2 mana spell in our deck is Krark's Thumb. So this is another 3 mana tutor. This is essentially another Fabricate, but instant speed. In the instances where we absolutely need it, it can be a counter for an instant or sorcery that's going to make us lose the game. But in the end, this is a way for us to get Krark's Thumb. We've got Negate. Again, decent removal. We've got Temur Battle Rage, one of my favorite combat tricks and one of the best ways to make sure that Okaun's damage is getting through on an attack. This is target creature gains double strike until end of turn, and if you've got a creature with power 4 or greater, gets trample as well. So trample double strike, real good. This means that Okaun only needs to be 12/12 in order to deal lethal commander damage. And trust me, in this deck, it's not hard to do. All right, it's a big, hey, surprise, you're dead kind of deal. Okay, and then we've got Whir of Invention, another tutor. All right. Want to take a quick moment. I want to thank everybody in chat for coming out. A lot of really beautiful faces out there. Thank you, friends, for coming out, hanging out as I ramble through this. Do make sure to let me know in chat if there's anything that you want to say about this deck, anything that you would include, anything about my insights that you think is wrong, we'll say, or anything that you would do otherwise. All right, we're going to dive right into artifacts in just a second. Okay, yes, only 10 followers away from a sub button. Yeah, already. Cool. Okay, as we head into our artifacts, keep in mind that a lot of these artifacts are mana rocks. Okay, I'm personally a huge advocate of 2 mana rocks, and it looks like Gavin is too, by the way that he's designed this deck. Okay, we've got Arcane Signet, Izzet Signet, Mind Stone, Talisman of Creativity, and Thought Vessel as our mana rocks here. A+. This is what your mana rock package should look like in any deck. Okay, if you include this many mana rocks, I think it was 5, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and Soul Ring on top of that, excellent. Excellent. That is a fantastic amount of ramp to include in any deck. And yes, mana rocks are ramp. Think of mana rocks as rampant growth that you can use right away. Right? Having 5, essentially 6 with a Soul Ring in here, real good. Okay? So let's look at our non-mana rock artifacts. First up is Boom Pile. I had a nasty Boom Pile earlier today. So Boom Pile is a 4 mana artifact board wipe. Okay, so you tap and flip a coin. If you lose the flip, it does nothing. But if you win the flip, it destroys everything. Okay, this is your oh shit button in this deck. If you absolutely need to reset the board, Boom Pile is the way to do it. It's a great threat, a la Nevinyrral's Disc, to just sit on the board and just kind of be omnipresent, right? I think that it's incredibly cool. I think that it's a great rattlesnake card as design goes. And in this deck, we can choose when it goes off. We can absolutely just say, yes, we're going to do it. Or we can tap it every turn just to spin that wheel and see if we end up destroying everything. Because we have 5 mana value commanders, we might want to do that. If we don't have heavy board investment, if somebody has gotten off to a very strong start, we might just want to Boom Pile and reset the board so that the next turn we untap and cast one of our commanders. It's entirely possible that we do that. Okay. Then we've got Commander's Plate. Commander's Plate is a fantastic inclusion in this deck. First of all, it's a $20 card. having a $20 reprint, especially a brand new card out of 2020's Commander Legends, a $20 card reprinted in this deck is amazing. Kudos to them for putting a card this valuable in here. But when you've got a 2-color identity deck, but 1-color identity Commander's Plate is incredible. Commander's Plate attached to a monocolored commander gives them protection from 4 different colors. Right? +3/+3, and all of the colors your commander isn't. So this is giving Okaun protection from white, green, black, and blue. And that's pretty damn good. That means that he's going to be able to attack uncontested. And attacking uncontested with an Okaun is big punchies. All right. Next up is Crooked Scales. So Crooked Scales is an interesting one. Out of Mercadian Mass, old card, never been reprinted, not very good. Okay, 4 mana, and then 4 and tap. So Crooked Scales does nothing until you've paid 8 mana for it. But then you choose target creature you control and target creature an opponent controls, and you flip a coin. If you win the flip, you destroy the creature the opponent controls. If you lose the flip, destroy the creature you control unless you pay 3 and reflip the coin. This is the most convoluted removal I've ever seen. This is, and no offense, terrible. Absolutely terrible. This is a must-cut card in this deck because this is going to do nothing. There are no instances where you are casting this on 4 and then activating it on 5 and then reactivating it later. This is a card that does nothing. Nothing. I am removing it right now. It is that bad. All right. Now, another really cool reprint in this Secret Lair Commander deck is Embercleave. Embercleave, in case you aren't familiar, costs 1 less for each attacking creature you control. And in this case, it's not going to be very many creatures you control that are attacking. Again, unless we've got multiple Okauns in this deck, then we are probably only ever attacking with 1 Okaun. None of these others are big punchies. Okay, but if we can make multiple copies of Okaun, we're going to be attacking with him. So Embercleave is probably going to cost us 5 mana to cast, but it's got flash, so we can cast it at instant speed. When it enters the battlefield, it auto-equips to a creature, and then gives it +1/+1, double strike and trample. Do you remember what I said about Temur Battle Rage on an Okaun with double strike and trample? Being able to flash in an Embercleave means you are taking a player out of the game. Full stop. You are going to trample over their blockers, and you are going to deal lethal commander damage to them. Plain and simple. This is, once you swing with Okaun, if you've got mana up, your opponent should be panicking. Because an Embercleave coming down or a Temur Battle Rage coming down means you have killed somebody. You are a murderer. All right. We got Lightning Greaves. Unsurprisingly, we want to attach Lightning Greaves to some of our critical non-attacking creatures. Our attacking creatures we want to target with spells, so we aren't exactly going to want to put Greaves on an Okaun. But we can until he gets up and running, so to speak. Putting a Lightning Greaves on your Zndrsplt means that your draw engine's always going to be up and active and alive. Putting Lightning Greaves on your Krark the Thumbless means that you're always going to be able to flip coins to cast spells and get extra copies of them. Lightning Greaves, it's an auto-include in a lot of decks where your commander just does things. Okay. Next up is Shadow Spear. Another great reprint. Okay. So I gotta say, like, this Secret Lair Commander deck, fantastic for reprints. Shadow Spear has crawled up to be a $20 card. Back in 2020, I released a video on artifacts you should be playing more of, and one of them was Shadow Spear, and I'm glad that people have picked this up. This is a mini Loxodon Warhammer. And getting a creature +1/+1 trample and lifelink, bonkers. Absolutely insane. Getting Okaun trample in any instance is great, but when you can start gaining life off of that too, people just aren't going to be able to take you out. You're going to be eliminating a player and gaining potentially dozens of life off of that attack. Shadow Spear is a fantastic include. Swiftfoot's same note as Lightning Greaves, but better. You want Swiftfoot boots on Okaun. You don't want Lightning Greaves on Okaun. Why? Because we want to target Okaun with Temur Battle Rage, Embercleave, Slip Through Space, Seize the Day, and we can't do that with the Lightning Greaves on him. We can do that with Swiftfoot boots on him. Okay, so Swiftfoot boots is my preference here in terms of shoes for your big guy. All right, Sword of Vengeance. Sword of Vengeance is another way to make Okaun get damage through. Right? 6 mana altogether, 3 to cast, 3 to equip. Equipped creature gets +2/+0. First strike, vigilance, trample, and haste. Okay, so this is another great way to make sure that Okaun is attacking, Okaun is blocking, and Okaun is trampling through blockers. Again, fantastic include here. Nothing to say about it. And then we've got Whisper Silk Cloak. Whisper Silk Cloak gives Shroud and makes a creature unblockable. So this is one of the instances where I would put Whisper Silk Cloak, a Shroud enabler, on our Okaun. Because just making Okaun unblockable achieves everything that we want to do out of giving him trample. Right? So once we've got a Whisper Silk Cloak on Okaun, we are going to be taking somebody out. Fantastic, fantastic. As you can see here from the artifacts of the 16 that were included, I cut one of them. I think that this selection of artifacts, chef's kiss. Fantastic. I wouldn't expect any less from one of Magic's senior designers. Okay? Our enchantments, on the other hand, leave something to be desired. Okay? We've got one of our win cons here. In case you've never seen Chance Encounter before, Chance Encounter is an enchantment that says whenever you win a coin flip, put a luck counter on it. Then at the beginning of our upkeep, if Chance Encounter has 10 or more luck counters on it, you win the game. Yeah. I like cards that say you win the game. And in this case, with all of the coins that we're flipping, it's really good. Yeah, a hit people guy. I like winning the game. Who knew? But being able to do that without ever attacking, or without having to jump through some of these hoops, this is easily a condition that you can meet in 2 turns in this deck. Even early game, you're going to be flipping enough coins that if you're on a streak, with or without Krark's Thumb out, you can easily have 7 or 8 luck counters on this before any of your commanders come down. So it's definitely one of our must-haves in this deck, even if we don't have ways to go tutor it up. All right. Now we've got an interesting include here in Footfall Crater. So Footfall Crater is an enchant land that lets us tap the land, and yes, it is tap. The enchanted land gains the ability. Hey, folks. Target creature gains trample and haste until end of turn. It's got cycling, meaning we can rebuy with it if we really don't need trample and haste. But this is another way to ensure that Okaun is swinging on the turn he comes down for an extra mana, and that he's going to get some damage through. I like it. It's cost efficient, it's effective, and we can rebuy with it later in the game. I think it's pretty harmless to include, but it is a great way to ensure later in the game, if we get a late game Okaun and we've got that extra mana to spare in casting him, then he's going to be getting through for some damage. Okay. Next up, we've got Impulsive Maneuvers. So I mentioned high risk, high reward here, and this is the definition of that. Okay? This is an enchantment that reads, whenever a creature attacks you, flip a coin. If you win the flip, the next time that creature would deal combat damage this turn, it deals double damage instead. So essentially gains double strike. If you lose the flip, the next time that creature would deal combat damage this turn, prevent it. So if you lose the flip, your creatures are doing nothing. And with Okaun, you really, really don't want to do nothing. You really don't want to attack and not deal any damage. So impulsive maneuvers, you really need to ensure that you're winning that flip. So you need a Krark's Thumb out. I would not play impulsive maneuvers until I've got Krark's Thumb out. Easy as that. Again, you aren't attacking with anything apart from an Okaun in this deck. So, honestly, this one I can take or leave. What do you think, chat? Is impulsive maneuvers worth it in this deck? I'm really on the fence about it. Everybody watching on YouTube, let me know in the comments below. So next up, one of my favorites is Mirror March, because it makes copies of things. Unsurprisingly. Who knew? You got me exactly what I loved, copies of creatures. This 6-mana enchantment says whenever a non-token creature enters the battlefield under your control, flip a coin until you lose a flip. For each flip you win, create a token that's a copy of that creature. Hey! Those tokens gain haste. Hey! Exile them at the beginning of the next end step. So get this. Magical Christmas Land scenario. Now that we've added Sakashima of 1,000 Faces into this deck, we can ignore the legend rule. That means we can Mirror March our commander and have multiple copies of an Okaun or Zndrsplt out. Whew! What was that? That was just the sound of a million coins flipping and a million damage done. That is pretty crazy. So if we get multiple copies of one of our legendary creatures off of this, without a Sakashima out, or if it's not, if it's an actual legendary copy, then every copy we make just dies instantly. We have to sacrifice it to the legend rule. But if we've got, say, a Spark Double that comes down as a copy of Okaun, we can Mirror March multiple copies of a non-legendary Okaun. Can you imagine getting 3 or 4 copies of an Okaun? We can do that with a Krark's Thumb, with ignoring the legendary rule, and with Mirror March. I think this is one of those magical Christmas Land cards where if it works real good. And I love it in here. At the very least, it flips you a coin whenever you play a creature, whenever a creature enters the battlefield. All right. Whew. Give me a sec. All right. Next up is Planar Chaos, another enchantment. At the beginning of your upkeep, flip a coin. If you lose the flip, you sacrifice Planar Chaos. So essentially, you can be paying 3 mana for this spell, get to your upkeep, and then immediately sacrifice it. I've said it a couple of times regarding a few cards in this deck, but if you're paying 3 mana and doing nothing but losing a coin flip, I'm already on the fence about it. Whenever a player plays a spell, that player flips a coin. If they lose the flip, counter that spell. So this includes you too, and that's really that's a big yikes. Okay, so the interesting thing here is that it makes everybody flip coins for every spell they cast. We talked about this when we first looked at our commanders, but they say whenever a player flips a coin, or whenever a player wins a coin flip. So with Planar Chaos out, players flip a coin for every spell they cast. You break that symmetry, we do, with a Krark's Thumb out, because we have twice as many odds to get our spells to resolve, but essentially for every resolved spell that an opponent casts, we get the benefits of our commander. Right? That's huge. Huge! Big advantage there. For every spell cast. So, while Planar Chaos can come down, and then we sacrifice it in our upkeep off of a lost coin flip, imagine how many spells are cast into it in one turn cycle. I would say, even though this costs 3 mana, you aren't casting it until turn 6, until maybe turn 7, when your commanders are down. What's up, Carson? Thanks for joining us. All right. So, like, I like it, but it can be a big yikes as well. Players, much like with a Mystic Remora or a Rhystic Study, can just choose not to cast spells into it until you sacrificed it. In that case, it might be like taking an extra turn if nobody's casting any spells in between your turn. It's pretty good. It's pretty decent. All right. We've got classic staple of blue, Propaganda. Not bad. Not bad. And then we've got Risky Move. So Risky Move lives up to its name. 6 mana spell. All right. At the beginning of each player's upkeep, that player gains control of Risky Move. Not bad. Whenever you gain control of Risky Move, so it comes down and it doesn't affect you. Okay, keep that in mind. But then at each player's upkeep, they gain control of it. But whenever you gain control of Risky Move from another player, choose a creature you control and an opponent. Flip a coin. If you lose the flip, that opponent gains control of that creature. Okay? That's pretty okay. The real floor on some of our creatures is pretty low. So losing something like a Kaboomist or a Frenetic Sliver or a Goblin Archaeologist isn't bad in our it isn't bad in our deck. And this one makes other people flip coins on each of their turns, which plays into our commanders. 6 mana is a lot to ask for it. We want to be doing a lot of other things for 6 mana. So this one's really on the fence for me as a cut. I think getting everybody to flip a coin on each of their turns, sure, gets them involved and gets them interacting, but doesn't really provide a lot of benefit into our primary game plan here, and can bite us in the butt if the only creature that we have is one of our commanders, for instance. Again, I like it, but I don't love it. All right, getting into the lands, we've got 37 lands in the deck. I think 37 lands is a good number with 2 5-mana value commanders here. 37 lands is pretty okay, but one thing to be said about this mana base, and I mentioned it earlier, there are an awful lot of non-basics in here. There are especially a lot of non-basics that don't produce colored mana. Fortunately, our colored requirements for the deck, apart from a couple of 3 colored pip cards like Risky Move or War of Invention, doesn't have a very high color investment. So we can get away with some of this. I mentioned this in regards to Niv Mizzet Perun, but that 3 blue, 3 red mana value, woof. Chances are we are not going to get that on turn 6 in this deck, ever. Okay. For instance, let's just take a quick look. Academy Ruins, no colored mana. Buried Ruin, no colored mana. Cascade Bluff, filters, mana. Let's see. Desolate Lighthouse, no colored mana. Okay. Let's see. Inventor's Fair, no colored mana. Myriad Landscape, no colored mana. Path of Ancestry. That one does produce colored mana. Reliquary Tower. Boo, no colored mana. Okay. Rogue's Passage, no colored mana. Okay. Temple of the False God. Hey, I said the thing. Stop putting Temple of the False God in decks. Card's not good. Card's real not good. I hear all of you in chat laughing about this right now, memeing on this. Temple of the False God, notable bad card. Please cut it from your decks. Why? Because you might keep a 3-land hand where you've got Island, Mountain, Temple of the False God. Temple of the False God, as any land before your 5th land, does nothing. Does nothing. Please, stop playing Temple of the False God. Okay? And let's see. So the rest of the stuff casts colored mana. All right. Look, what if you plan for a good hand to be keepable, and then you draw lands that do nothing? Don't include cards in your deck that do nothing. That's the thing. That is my whole impetus behind getting into these tune-ups. Don't include cards in your deck that do nothing. You might have fun with them. They might be pet cards. Fantastic. But don't look at the ceiling of a card and evaluate it there. Look at the floor of a card and evaluate it there. And in this case, the floor of Temple of the False God is that it's a land that produces no mana. Cut it. All right. So looking at the rest of our lands, again, we've got, seven or eight lands that I said in here that don't produce any colored mana. We really can't afford a Niv Mizzet Perun in a deck where we might have 6 lands and 2 of them don't produce colored mana. So in these instances, I am going to remove our Fun Dragon here. Okay, but let's take a look at some of these lands that we're including here. And let's take a look at why we'd include them or why we wouldn't. Starting with Academy Ruins and Buried Ruin. Both ways to rebuy Krark's Thumb. I've mentioned it a few times, but there are a handful of cards in here that are just about getting Krark's Thumb and keeping Krark's Thumb out. And Academy Ruins and Buried Ruin are exactly that. Let's make sure that we have our linchpin card in Krark's Thumb. All right. Then we've got Cascade Bluffs, Command Tower, Exotic Orchard. These are all colored producers, especially the ones that produce any colored mana, like Cascade Bluffs if we filter, Command Tower, and Exotic Orchard. Of course, must-haves. All right. Desolate Lighthouse, on the other hand, I think is a trap card. You've triggered my trap card, Yugi. In this instance, Desolate Lighthouse, 3 mana to loot a card. Completely unnecessary in this deck. I think that there's enough card draw as it is, one of our commanders being a massive card draw engine, that we don't need to be paying essentially 4 mana for it. All right? So I'm going to cut Desolate Lighthouse right now. Okay? Flamekin Village. You may reveal an elemental card from your hand. If you don't, Flamekin Village enters tapped. There aren't a lot of elementals in this deck. So chances are this is going to be an enters the battlefield tapped land. Okay, and then it's red tap, target creature gains haste until end of turn. So this is another way to give Okaun haste. We're essentially paying 2 extra mana to give Okaun haste in this instance, and honestly, we've got a lot of ways to pay 1 mana to give Okaun haste. I think having a 2 mana haste enabler, especially on a land that enters the battlefield tapped and can really bite us in the butt, isn't the way that we want to go. So I'm cutting it. Great Furnace is an interesting include here. It's largely in here as another artifact to sacrifice to something like a reshape, but I think is unnecessary. There's no reason why this can't be another mountain in this deck. We don't have a lot of artifact synergies in here, but Great Furnace, I would cut for a mountain in these instances. We aren't an artifact deck. There's no reason to include it. Okay? It's an okay furnace, is what I like to say. Okay? Inventor's Fair, hey, guess what? This is another tutor. Okay? This gains us life when we've got a bunch of artifacts out, gains us 1 life a turn, but then we can pay 4 and tap and sacrifice it to go get Krark's Thumb, or go get a way to make Okaun unblockable, or give him trample, or haste, or any of those great things. This is a great include in this deck. Is it Boilerworks and the bounce lands? So I can go on a rant about these all day long, but you've been listening to me for about an hour and a half at this point, so I'll keep it short. The bounce lands are traps. Okay, much like Temple of the False God, the bounce lands are traps. They don't ramp you. You're better off including another 2 mana rock in your deck than including a land that enters tapped and bounces a land back to your hand. It costs you a turn and makes you another mana. It's not worth it. Replace it with a basic. My motto, folks, if you're a fan of the channel, play more basics. No harm in them. They enter untapped, they make a colored mana. Can't ask for much else. Okay? Myriad Landscape is another bad card. Myriad Landscape enters the battlefield tapped and then costs you 3 mana to go get 2 lands into play. So you've set yourself back 2 turns to ramp 1 ahead. That's bad. All right? I want everybody out there to know, paying essentially 4 mana to get 1 land into play is incredibly bad return on investment. Okay? Because you don't get the mana that the turn it comes into play, and you pay 3 mana, the 2 that you're paying and tapping it, in order to activate it, to go get 2 tapped lands. That has set you back so much that if you're looking to ramp, don't include it on lands. Include it on 2 mana rocks, of which this deck already does really well. So stop playing Myriad Landscape. I can see some corner cases if you're in a 5-color deck and you really need to tutor up a specific color. But no, for the most part, cut it. All right. Then we've got Path of Ancestry. So Path of Ancestry is an interesting include in here because we've got a Cyclops Berserker and a Homunculus and no other Cyclops Berserkers or Homunculi in the deck. This is basically an ETB tapped land that scries whenever you cast one of your commanders. That's a poor ROI, folks. This is going to come into play tapped when you don't want it to, and it's going to scry once or twice throughout the course of a game. You're better off including a basic. Reliquary Tower. So normally, I'm a fan of shitting on Reliquary Tower. All right? You have no maximum hand size. We have Thought Vessel for getting rid of our maximum hand size. However, this deck has a penchant for drawing a ridiculous number of cards. I like saying if you can't win with the best 7 cards in your library, then what is your deck even designed to do? So if you draw 20 cards and have to discard down to 7, you've kept the best out of 7 cards. You don't need all of the other options. Having no maximum hand size and costing you the ability to produce a colored mana is not good. It's not. Okay? In this deck, I can see a corner case for it, a very, very small corner case just because of the volume of cards that you're drawing off of your commander. But, folks, stop including it in every deck. I'm going to cut it from this one, from my tune-up in particular, for exactly that reason. Now we've got Rogue's Passage. So Rogue's Passage is a colorless producing land that we really do want because this one can make Okaun unblockable. We've talked about how important it is to make our commander unblockable and swing in for them big punchies and that big damage. Rogue's Passage, chef's kiss for that. I think it's a absolute staple of our format, especially if we're going to be attacking with 99 Okaun in this instance. Shivan Reef, love it. Play the pain lands. They're great. They don't deal any damage to you when you don't need them to deal any damage to you, and they make the color mana you want when you need it. 1 life is not bad in a format where we start with 40. Spine Rock Knoll. So no offense to Jeremy Knoll on this one, but I'm not a big fan of the hideaway lands here. The hideaway lands are tough. Okay? Tucking away one of your most important cards and maybe never meeting the criteria for casting it for free with this, or for 1 mana or 2 mana with this, it's not great. What if I tucked away my Quark the Thumbless underneath this and I never got a turn where somebody was dealt 7 or more damage in a turn? If I'm dealing more than 7 damage in a turn, I'm winning. I mean, that's the way that Okaun works. Right? But coming into play tapped, getting rid of one of our best cards, and then putting it on the bottom, I'm not a fan of it. I would rather give it a snip. All right? Okay. Sulphur Falls, fantastic, but we need to play more basics. Right now, we've only got 15 basics in the deck. Sulphur Falls, chances are, might not come into play untapped. So now that I've cut a few lands here, I'm going to add in some more basics in this deck in order to bring us up to where it's going to be a little bit more consistent. Temple of Epiphany, it enters tapped. that scry is not worth losing the tempo of casting behind curve. I've released other videos about it on the channel. Go check it out on my YouTube channel. But playing behind curve with tap lands like this is not worth the minimal upside of a scry. All right, so we're going to cut it. I'm not going to say any more words about Temple of the False God except to remove it. Then we've got Teleria West. So Teleria West, really interesting. Teleria West is much like Muddle the Mixture, a tutor. It's a 3 mana, go and get a 0 mana value spell. This could be another land. This could be another 0 value spell, like a Pact of Negation, for instance. Anything that has a mana value of 0. In this deck, it might go and get us a land that either makes Okaun unblockable or tutors up a Crook's Thumb. But honestly, I don't think that there are enough instances of 0 mana value cards that we want and that are that crucial in this deck that we want to be tutoring for them. So I'm going to cut it. We've got Training Center. Fantastic. Best lands in the format. And then we got Wandering Fumarole. So Wandering Fumarole is a man land that enters tapped. There's no reason why we would want a man land in this deck. Stop including non-basics for the sake of including non-basics. All right. Stormgrad, you brought up a fantastic point. I really do love something like Access Tunnel or Hidden Bookcase or anything like that as great unblockable enablers. But what we've done here, fam, is that we've made a few cuts to the deck, mostly in the lands department, but we've identified some creatures and some spells that we would ideally cut and replace. So now I want to talk about what to add to the deck. All right? So the first thing that we want to do is we want to see what cards weren't included in the deck that fit into our core synergy of flipping coins. Okay, our core synergy of flipping coins in this instance, sorry for the eye burn here, fam, is what we want to be doing. So the really cool thing here is that Mox Field includes Scryfall Search, but the advanced search functions don't exactly equal what we want them to from Scryfall itself. So what I did was I just went over to Scryfall and I copied my search taxonomy. So I did a search for everything that is blue and red and has the word flip in the text box. And what I can do is I can enter that into the search field here in Mox Field so that I can get all of the results from Scryfall in Mox Field so I can add them directly to my deck without having to copy and paste them from Scryfall over to Mox Field. All right. And then we're going to take a look at our advanced results. And look at this. This is everything in Magic that is at least red or blue that has the word flip in it. Now you can see that some of them say flip in terms of flip this card, right? But some of them flip coins. Okay. So we're going to take a look at some of these and see what we would add in, what we would play around with in order to add in some of our primary synergies. Okay, so we want to keep things at the lower end of the mana value scale because what we did was we cut or have cut some of the lower end of our curve, and we want to make sure that we refill it, or else we aren't going to be casting any spells until we cast our commander, basically. All right. So the first one that I want to take a look at here is something like a Fickle Efreet. Okay. So Fickle Efreet is a 4-mana 5/2 Efreet. Whenever it attacks or blocks, flip a coin at the end of combat. If you lose the flip, an opponent gains control of it. Why does that sound good, folks? Because it makes other people flip coins. And our commander loves that. Our commanders love other people flipping coins. The other great thing here is that it can be another political tool. You can say, it's not the defending player that gains control of the Ifrit. You can attack the person who's, say, on the throne, lose the flip at the end of combat, and give it to somebody else who's going to attack that same player for that same reason. This isn't necessarily something that somebody's going to gain control of and then come back to bite you. I think that this is a really interesting one, and I would include it personally. Plus, it's 25 cents. It's out of Prophecy. Nobody cares about these cards. So I'd add that in. Here's an interesting card that I do want to touch on right now. This is one that I would include in the upgrade for this deck. Frenetic Ifrit. Frenetic Ifrit is a unique card. Okay? It's a 3-mana 2/1 flyer that has a 0-mana activated ability to flip a coin. And then an opponent calls heads or tails. If you win the flip, it phases out. Otherwise, you bury your Ifrit. Okay? So some really interesting Oracle text on this one is that the Ifrit doesn't need to be in play. The Ifrit doesn't need to be in play for this ability to resolve. You can pay 0 mana and put 100 instances of this flip on the stack. If you lose the first one and you sacrifice the Frenetic Ifrit, the other 99 copies still resolve. Okay? Interestingly, they didn't change the Oracle text on this to say that it must be in play. Okay? The Frenetic Sliver here does say, as long as it's in play, flip a coin. So in this case, we can include Frenetic Ifrit in this deck and just flip as many coins as we want. As many coins as we want. Put 100 instances of coin flip on the deck, on the stack. This would be a really, really cheap and fast way to win a game. If we had Chance Encounter out and Frenetic Ifrit and we flipped 100 coins, if we win just 10 of them, somebody has to stop us before our next upkeep where we win. And that can happen as early as turn 4 for all we want. Okay? The downside about it is that Frenetic Ifrit costs $26 All right? It's expensive for an include in a fun deck like this. It can lead to some really linear lines in your deck where you're just going to get the Ifrit and flipping as many coins as you want and winning the game. But if you want to ratchet up the power level on this deck, this is the way to do it. Okay? And I'm going to include it just for the sake of maxing out the potential on this deck. All right? Then we've got Goblin Assassin. Whenever a Goblin Assassin or another assassin enters the battlefield, each player flips a coin. Each player whose coin comes up tails sacrifices a creature. So this is a 5-mana. Whenever a Goblin enters the battlefield, everybody sacrifices a creature, or your opponents may sacrifice a creature. This is really interesting. Only really good if Quirk's Thumb is out. Otherwise, you could be sacrificing some stuff. It's 5 mana, so it competes with our commander. So I'm not a huge fan of it. But if your opponents are playing a goblin deck, like a Krenko deck, for instance, this can turn every goblin into a Fleshbag Marauder, which is, interesting. It can flip a bunch of coins and have everybody flip a bunch of coins. And when everybody flip coins, we win. All right. Again, I wouldn't necessarily include it. All right. Let's take a look. So let's see. We've got Goblin Psychopath. Whenever it attacks or blocks, flip a coin. If you lose the flip, the next time it would deal damage, it deals that damage to you instead. A little too risky in my opinion. But Goblin Trap Runner, on the other hand, I think is a perfect fit for this deck. Goblin Trap Runner is a 4-mana 4/2. Whenever Trap Runner attacks, you flip 3 coins. So if this does nothing but flip you 3 coins, it does more than enough. But for each flip you win, you create a Goblin that's tapped and attacking. It's a 4/2, which means it's a hefty attacking body. But if you get 2 turns with it attacking, you're flipping 6 coins. And that is fantastic. I would add this in because this is another one that you can make unblockable or suit up or use your combat tricks on just to flip more coins and get more benefit from your commanders. Right? Let's see. We've got Carplusian Minotaur. We've got our Krarks. Mana Crypt. Okay, here's another one for the upgrade. Mana Crypt is $162 right now, fam. That is prohibitively expensive. But it flips a coin. And this flips a coin in your upkeep. So while it does increase the overall power level of your deck, it plays into our core synergy. And you can't shy away from that. I would include this if you have a Mana Crypt, especially because we do have 5 mana value commanders. But because it fits into our core synergy, I would be more inclined to include this. This is a fun deck, not a powerful deck, and just flipping an extra coin every turn gets you a lot of good stuff. Yeah, if you can pick up a cheap Mana Crypt, they're only going to go up, and I don't see them being reprinted anytime soon, even though they might be overdue. Their last reprinting was in Double Masters in 2020, so we're going on 2 years since a reprint now. They're always going to be valuable, so pick them up if you got them. Okay, and again, I'll include it for the sake of our discussion. Molten Birth is an interesting one. So Molten Birth is 3 mana to create 2 elementals, and then you flip a coin. If you win the flip, return it to your hand. So this one's really interesting with implications like Quirk the Thumbless, where we can be copying it and returning it to our hand to cast it over and over again. I really like it, especially in earlier game scenarios where we can be paying 3 mana, making 2 elementals, and then saving it to cast later with our commanders out. I think it's valuable early game and late game. So I really like it. Plus it makes 2 bodies for 2 attackers. Mirror March is already in here, Carson. It's included in the base deck, but I went on a rant about how much I love Mirror March because it makes copies of things. All right, so taking a look at some of these other ones, Scoria Worm, another 5 mana. This one's a 5 mana 7/7. At the beginning of your upkeep, flip a coin. If you lose the flip, return it to its owner's hand. A little too risky, and it does compete with that 5 mana slot with our commanders. Okay, let's see. Sorcerer's Strongbox, flip a coin. If you win the flip, sacrifice the Strongbox. Let's see, I'm looking for stuff on the lower end of the mana scale. 2-headed Giant, 4 mana 4/4. Whenever it attacks, flip 2 coins. 2 coins better than 1 coin? Absolutely. Just like 2 heads better than 1. Maybe not in this instance. If both come up heads, gains double strike. If both come up tails, it gains menace. That's benefit. That's just, hey, look, it's good regardless of what benefit it is, because at a minimum, it flips us 2 coins. And for our deck, that's fantastic. Gaining Menace or gaining Double Strike, stellar. This one's an include, in my opinion. Okay, we have Volatile Rig. Volatile Rig is an interesting one. I've loved this one since Return to Ravnica. But it's a 4/4 for 4 with Trample and attacks each turn if able. When it is dealt damage, flip a coin. If you lose the flip, you sacrifice it. When it dies, flip a coin. If you lose the flip, it deals 4 damage to each creature and each player. Boom, boom, boom. Okay, and in those instances, it's potentially a board wipe. So it's an attacker that people might not want to attack into for the threat, that people might not want to block for the threat of blowing up their board. But it is a great way for us to attack in over and over and over again. It's essentially 4/4 unblockable if somebody's got a small board. We can win flips with this. We can lose flips with this. Again, I think it's great. Comes down before our commanders, does everything that we want it to do. All right. And let's see. That's everything that says flip in Magic. So let's take a look at some of these spells. I tend to avoid some of the older ones just because not a lot of value in them. But here's Winter Sky. Flip a coin. Target opponent calls heads or tails while it's in the air. Again, flip a coin. Whoever wins. Deals 1 damage to each creature and each player. Otherwise, each player draws a card. Again, flips a coin for 1 mana, can draw everybody a card or deal a damage. You know what? It's an old card, but in this deck, it can be a lot of value for us. I actually like it. Mana Clash is another one that I typically avoid, but read this one. For 1 mana, it's a sorcery. You and target opponent each flip a coin. Each flip a coin. Okay? Mana Clash deals 1 damage to any player whose coin comes up tails. Repeat this process until both players come up heads at the same time. Okay? So, much like Carson pointed out, these are flips that you can't win. These are flips that care whether they come up heads or tails, but it's still coin flipping. Coin flipping is still what we care about. Our commanders only trigger off of winning or losing flips, but flipping coins is still what we're all about here. We can do a lot of damage with this with a Kark's Thumb out as we choose whether things are coming up heads or tails. All right. So really, really interesting. So let's go back to our deck list and see what we're looking at here. So we've added in a few cards. We're still shy on lands. We're going to add in 12 more lands. So let's take a look at that first. We're skewing heavily on red. 61% of all symbols are red. We're 39% are blue. So we're going to want to skew about 60-30 on our lands here. So let's add more. And we've got 12, so we'll add 8 more there. And 4 more islands. All right. And that puts us 6 over on our main board here. All right. So we've got some cool stuff. Let's see. So anything stand out for you, fam, on what's to be cut in this? I know that we talked about some of our creatures here. Some of our less than favorable enchantments as well. But what pops out to you? So I wanted to cut things like Goblin Archaeologist, as well as Frenetic Sliver, and Goblin Kaboomist. Not a fan of any of those creatures. Again, the benefit, very, very little to them. All right. I think a great suggestion from Stormgrad in chat, Kazul's Fury is a fling. And is an MDFC. I think having a fling in this deck is great for our commander. Much like Chandra's Ignition, where we can deal damage to everybody with a big, bulky Okaun. Being able to throw Okaun at the last player would be fantastic. If you punch in and take somebody out with commander damage, and then throw your Okaun at the last remaining opponent, that makes for good games. And having an MDFC isn't going to hurt. It's a land when you need a land. I would not cut a land for it. My rule of thumb is that an MDFC counts as half of a land, much like a mana rock does in these instances. And when we're looking at a mana curve of just under 3, 37 might be a little bit high on the lands. Okay? And let's see. So we've got 4 more cuts to make from this. I think I am going to drop a mountain here, drop us to 36 lands, just because that mana curve is pretty decent. But also, I want to cut from the top. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to sort by mana cost here to take a look at what our most expensive stuff is. 6 mana looks like the top of our curve in most of these instances, save for Blasphemous Act, but it's never going to cost 6 mana. Risky Move, I think, is one of the cards that I really wanted to cut. That 3 red mana investment is rough to hit, and it's got a minimal benefit to us, even if it does flip a coin on each player's turn. I think at 6, we want to be doing things that get our commanders through, rather than things that... yeah, thanks, Joel. Is it? Maybe not. All right. So let's remove Risky Move here, and that's actually going to bring our mana value down, our mana curve down. Okay, cool. Embercleave is also 6 mana, but again, with an attacking creature, it only costs 5. It's another win con as well with Okaun coming out. I think that it is definitely an include in here. We've got Boom Pile. All right. I think Long-Term Plans is the weakest of our tutors, personally. It's all good, buddy. Long-Term Plans is the weakest of our tutors here. I'm willing to cut it. We have plenty of consistency in other ways to go get Krark's Thumb or get it back from the yard. I know somebody in chat mentioned Goblin Welder as well as a way to pull Krark's Thumb out of the yard with our volume of artifacts that we have here. Solve the Equation is great, but Solve the Equation only goes to get us an instant or sorcery. So Solve the Equation here is a sorcery that searches for an instant or sorcery card. And we don't really have any linchpin instant or sorcery cards here. We would essentially be tutoring for a tutor to go get Krark's Thumb in this instance. I think Solve the Equation is better for decks that have an instant or sorcery that's a real linchpin. And in this deck, I don't think that is it. Okay, so I'm going to remove it. Goblin Welder was recommended here as a way to get Krark's Thumb out of the bin. I think that's interesting. We have a few other ways to do that. If I was really invested in bringing the mana curve down, then I would include that. And fantastic point, Chandra's Ignition can potentially be a game winner for us, but keep in mind that we're going to want to go get Chandra's Ignition the turn that we want to play it, and the 3 mana on Solve the Equation followed by the 5 mana on Chandra's Ignition is 8 mana to go get it and cast it. I think that's a little too much. We could do something like Mystic Tutor. We could absolutely include that. That's less mana to cast, instant speed, tutors it to the top of our library. The only problem with that is costs quite a bit of mana. I would include it in the upgrade, if anything else. I think that our win cons here are going to be swinging with a massive Okaun or through Chance Encounter. Having the option to essentially fling your Okaun at everybody with a Chandra's Ignition is a great backup plan. All right, so let's see what some of our other stuff. If you're going tall, bin Embercleave. It's a good recommendation. I do like it just in terms of a surprise you're dead kind of thing. I mentioned this earlier, but with something like Temur Battle Rage as well, having a surprise double strike on a creature is just you've taken somebody out of the game. It is a one-punch man kind of win con here. This one, again, you're probably only attacking with one creature, your Okaun, so it's going to cost 5. So in terms of tricks here, maybe it's worth leaving on the cutting room floor. It's a shame. I really like it. All right, and that brings us to 100 even. And honestly, we've made a few really cool cuts and some really cool additions here. And Firefox, amazing suggestion. Kedis is a great add here because Kedis, Emberclaw Familiar, is a great way for Okaun to deal damage to everybody. Note that Okaun doesn't deal the damage and it's not commander damage, but if Okaun swings at one person for 100, who cares if it's commander damage or not? You are swinging in and you are big punching someone here. You are either dealing just the bare minimum amount of damage to take them out with commander damage, or you are doing overkill. There's no in between with this. This is win 3 flips, take somebody out, kill somebody. And that's exactly what we want to do here. I think Kedis is a fantastic recommendation. Thank you very much. All right, and that begs the question, what are we cutting here? Maybe we cut something where there is no winner on a flip. I know I added in, was it Winter Sky? It was Winter Sky and Two-Headed Giant, but let's cut Winter Sky here. I don't like the old cards. And that'll bring us down to 100. That brings our curve down to an average mana value of 2.8. Right where I like it. I love my mana curves right around 3 at a peak. And look at this. We've got this great curve where almost nothing is competing with our commanders, right? And we've got just about nothing to spells that cost more than our commanders. I think that this is a perfect synergy pile, my friends. This is great. So the question is, how does it play? One of the things that I love to do after I've done a tune-up is run some hands. Okay? Here is where Moxfield really shines. We can run some play tests and we can run some hands to see what an average is and see what we're looking at. So I'm going to deal another hand and let's take a look. We've got 3 lands, all basics. Love to see it. We've got a Krark the Thumbless in our opening hand. That one's interesting. We've got a Stitch in Time, too, and a Footfall Crater. So we've got something that we can cast on 1 and 2, even if they aren't doing a lot. And then we can cast Stitch in Time on turn 3 and take that gamble to take an extra turn, to return it to our hand, or get an extra copy of it with Krark. I think that this is an okay start here. I'm really put off by the lack of rocks in this opener. So I'm going to draw an extra one, and it's a land and then a chance encounter. You know, it's all right. If I drew into that chance encounter before I cast a Stitch in Time, I would cast the chance encounter, then go for the Stitch in Time and the Krark the Thumbless to start putting some counters on chance encounter. In the end, after I drew a card or 2, I think that I'd be really happy with this hand. The thing that I want to do is I want to see more keepable hands than hands to toss. Okay? Here, okay, this one's a spicy one. We've got that Mana Crypt that we added in our opening hand, as well as 3 basics and a Fabricate. This means that on turn 1, we're going to go get Krark's Thumb. Then on turn 2, we cast the Krark's Thumb, and on turn 3, we can start Molten Birthing and returning it to our hand over and over and over again until we've got a board presence or until we're ready to cast our commanders. Our next couple of draws are Mana Rocks. Perfect. This means turn 2, we play a land, cast the Mana Rock, cast out Krark's Thumb. Can't ask for more. Okay? I mean, that's a potential like turn 4 commander, turn 3 commander, turn 4 both commanders, turn 5 we drop a Planar Chaos. Again, you can't ask for better with this. Right? Here's one of the first ones that I'd throw back. Only 2 lands and no rocks in it. Slip Through Space is useless until we get a creature out. Yeah, this one is a toss. Here's another 2 lands, no rocks. But we do have Krark's Thumb in our opener. And we've got a Shadow Spear to drop on turn 1. So we've got a turn 1-2 and a turn 2. A turn 1 play and a turn 2 play. This one I'm on the fence about. It would really depend on drawing a land. We can get screwed with this one, but this is a risky keep. And an Izzet Signet off the top means that we were rewarded for this one. This one ends up being a keeper. Here's a great example of what we want to. This one we aren't casting anything until turn 3 when we're muddling the mixture to go get a Krark's Thumb. Then we're casting our commanders. Then we're flipping coins. And then we can seize the day and start taking people out with Okaun. Like, this is basically your setup and your win in your opener. Everything that you draw beyond this is gravy. I think that this is a great example of a keeper. Even if we drew nothing but lands with this, I think that this is, again, a great keepable hand. So far, we've only had one that we would throw back. Here's a turn 1 Preordain that would have to go get us a mountain in this instance because we've got 3 red spells in our hand, at least 1 mountain. Oh, Preordain into a Ponder. Yeah, I would keep this one as well. Plenty of lands, plenty of draw fixing. It's fantastic. Overall, I think that the deck straight out of the box, really strong. And I think that with some of these updates, it's even stronger. We've talked about some of the upgrades that we do, that Mana Crypt being among them, but we've talked about Mystic Tutor being a good upgrade for the deck, the Frenetic Efreet being a good upgrade for the deck. It does cost $25. But look, this is a deck that I think out of the box, you pay the $100 price tag on it, and it's a $300 deck. And then you add in another $150. Of that, a lot of that is Mana Crypt. And you've got a deck that is really strong and a lot of fun. It's really interactive. It's got some really political elements to it. And honestly, I'd love to sit down across the table from somebody playing this deck. Everybody watching on YouTube, let me know in the comments below what you think about this deck, both out of the box and the upgrade, the tune-up that we've done to it, of which is linked in the description. And be sure to check me out on Twitch. I'm going to be doing more of these because this was a lot of fun. All right. As always, folks, good luck and have fun. A massive shout out to all of the patrons that support the channel. I could not do this without you. In particular, a special shout out to our Lodestone Golems, Andrew M., Ben Davis, Ben Frayne, Jonathan McManus, and Cameron Scott. And our premium patrons are Metalwork Colossi, Jedson Bates, Matt Oakes, Matthew Chandler, Sean Carrier, Timothy Conan, and Wyatt M. Thank you, everyone.